Remote working has been heralded as a solution to some of the problems of our fast-paced and pre-pandemic lifestyles, and working from home is touted as the best way for workers to feel mentally and physically well. But according to a recent piece in the New York Times, the reality is a little more complicated. So is working from home less healthy than we think? Joining me on the line is Peter Cosgrove, Managing Director of FutureWise and an expert on future trends. Peter, you're very welcome.
Thanks, Claire.
So what is this New York Times and a bit more of the kind of reports that are coming out about working from home?
I mean, it's really highlighting that, as you said, the focus has always been on productivity, and people are very much arguing that they're more productive at home. But it actually isn't really looking at probably the longer-term challenges around health. And kind of some simple ideas would be, if you think about it, when we are at home, they've done lots of research and show that when people are working from home versus when they go into the office, they just move less. And actually movement is completely linked to health. So even if you just checked your settings on most days when you worked from home versus went to the office, you'll even notice those little steps going upstairs, going into the office make a difference. So even when you work from home, it's simple things like you go from meeting to meeting. In work, you probably have to stand up and go to a different meeting and you stretch and move, whereas when you're at home, you literally have one Teams call, then it might be a Zoom call, but you might literally not leave your chair in between those meetings at all. And I think that's a real challenge, and these are some of the micro things that people aren't seeing about working from home.
Yeah, I mean, they're even heralding what's known as NEAT behaviour, non-exercise activity thermogenesis, which is those daily steps that you're talking about. But I think it's the work-life balance thing that we keep talking about, and I have such an issue with that word, because your work is very much threaded into your life as your life is threaded into your work, and we seem to be trying to scramble for something that's completely unattainable. And what appeals to people about working from home is that they can transition quicker into dinner that evening. They're cutting out the stressful commute. They can hang a wash out in the middle of the day. It's those little things that seem to be taking the stresses away, but we're also sacrificing other areas of our health and mental well-being.
Yeah. Absolutely. And the first thing that people realise, which they hadn't thought about, is that commute time, whether it's bus, train, car journey. And yes, we always talk about the negatives, but actually people realised there was a reflection time in between work and home, which actually they kind of gathered the thoughts of the day, and that actually happened. And suddenly people were just closing down a laptop, walking next door and being asked what was for dinner, and they didn't actually get that time. So they were kind of still in work mode. So this kind of idea of a boundary issue between work and home, kids used to see you in a suit and then in your casual clothes, and they kind of even they knew the difference between when you're working and you're not working, and those things have changed. And I think that's becoming a real challenge for people, because they're not really seeing that kind of working from home. All the research has shown we're definitely working longer hours, because we don't have a standard start and finish to the day, and we love to think we're these people and we're very, much we can do whatever we want, and we're very much focused on nobody's going to tell us what to do. But the reality is, when we were told to come into work at 9 and leave at 5:30, people were generally doing something similar to that, but at least they knew when the start and the finish of the day is. Now people are kind of getting up in the morning and the first thing they're doing is looking at email, because that's what work is now, sitting at home and doing your work, which is really struggling with kind of some of the longer term challenges around relationships and so forth.
Yeah, and I do wonder about the effect on family life, that kids are so conscious of us working. They see us on a laptop, they see us sitting in front of a computer, and there's a lot of, asking them to wait and hang on. And, look, that's also a necessary part of life too. But as you said, you're putting it right in front of their eyes, rather than having a very separate, this is family time and this is work time.
Yeah, and I think it comes down to the fact that, there was a time when, you kind of had email maybe, and that was it. Now you've email, you've WhatsApp, you've Slack, you've, FaceTime, you've Microsoft Teams, you've all of these different platforms. And I don't think companies are realizing that different people are connecting with people in 7 different ways. So it's very difficult for people, because most people's phone is also their work phone. Very few people now seem to separate the two. So it's really difficult for us when we see a red light against our email, even if it's a weekend, not to just have a quick check on it. And this is causing that huge challenge where we're working longer hours, But the interesting thing is people are always saying it's much more convenient at home working from home, but almost nobody ever says to me it's any more fun. So it's actually, so what we're doing a lot better is the tasks and being productive, but actually the bigger thing that we don't see is those kind of relationships and those conversations that we have, even with strangers, that aren't happening. And they're really, really important for us in the longer term. But because they're not measurable, because you can't say, well, that's something I did today, people are kind of ignoring them as not as important, when actually they're probably the most critical things we do.
Yeah, it's the social connection, isn't it? Not just with our colleagues, but, whether you're picking up a coffee on the way, you're saying hello to the bus driver. We really need those for our mental health.
Yeah, and there's a brilliant book by Norina Hertz, The Lonely Century, I mean, I always love that joke where someone says the best way to keep the seat beside you free in a bus is to smile at the person as they walk towards you, because we almost have this negative politeness culture. We find it weird that somebody would be being nice to us on public transport. But she talks about the whole idea that people now often leave home, put on headphones, walk into work, then they still have headphones on during the day. So all those tiny conversations they had with the barista or the bus driver or whoever it was, and that they're the kind of the social glue that kind of, helps us get through society, they're gone. But Nick Bloom, another guy he talks about we've got this whole issue with the polarization of views, which we're now obviously seeing the worst of in places like Twitter. But he said the interesting thing is we hang around with people who are like us. Our family are often very similar to us. The one place we really get a polarization of views is actually in the workplace. So if we're sitting, let's say, you're sitting beside someone, one's Sinn Féin, one's Fine Gael, one's Labour, and you're at work, you end up moderating your views, and that's kind of what the life is like. Whereas actually, if we spend more time at home and more time with people who are like us, and then we're online getting content which is the content that we want, we end up becoming much more polarized, and that's a real challenge. So these are much kind of longer, bigger challenges with more people living at home or working at home, more people in one bed apartments, so they aren't having those connections. And actually the biggest, probably the biggest research ever done by Harvard over 80 years about happiness says, the happiness is completely and utterly related to the length and the kind of breadth of your relationships. And as I said, they're one thing that's going to go away very, very quickly if we're not getting out there and meeting people.
That's so fascinating when you put it like that we're just in this insular little bubble all of the time, even with the information that we're taking. The algorithms are set to just tell us this one thing. What will that look like in 5, 10, 15 years and beyond? So what do we do about this though, Peter? Because there are so many workplaces now, there are buildings sitting empty that, now that we've sort of said goodbye to the lockdowns and everything, want their staff back. I went to a workplace wellbeing event recently in one of the big tech companies, and I couldn't believe how beautiful this building was, with on-site gym, a kids' family room, a learning centre. Like, they had a kind of a working area and then an area to go and chill out and talk and meet, and free food canteen and bar and all sorts, and yet people are choosing to stay at home.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think that there's been a huge issue over the last couple of years where it feels like employer versus employee. Employers want us back in the office 5 days a week, and the employee never wants to come back. And we're kind of having this kind of fight between the two. So firstly, employers need to actually change how they're kind of communicating this, because actually a lot of them are doing it for the right reasons. They're trying to tell younger workers there's a huge amount you're going to learn from your colleagues, from meeting people, from kind of talking to people in different departments, accidental bumping into people, hearing other people in sales meetings because you're sitting beside them. All of those conversations you have when you sit beside people that you're never going to get at home. But they need to be selling that and not saying, we want you in the office because we don't believe you're working hard when you're at home, which is what the message is from people at home. And they're not hearing that. So that's the challenge, because some of those things, as you said, like kind of the communication things, are causing real anxiety for people, because they're seeing, like kind of emails, but they're not actually meeting the person and realizing, actually, I got the tone of that all wrong. So we kind of got to get people back in the office for the right reasons. But if you're going to get people back in the office, both employees and employers need to realize you got to do things different when you're in the office. So I say to people, if you're going into the office with your team, the first thing you organize is lunch. You have to have lunch. I've heard people go into the office, but all they do is then sit in the room, put their headphones on, and they're on video calls all day. So you have to make it a different type of day if you're going to make that effort and going in and actually chat and discuss it and meet your colleagues and not have the same day. So work is one of these things we have to think about. There's definitely times when you should be at home doing your best work on your own with no interruptions. And there is definitely times you should be in the office. But the problem with being in the office, people don't see little things like me helping you, Claire, because maybe you've forgotten about something, or you don't know how this technology works, or you help me because I don't know how this works. All of those things happen because we're in the office. So we need to understand it's not just about the work you do at home. It's the fact that you're part of a collective and there's other people who maybe need your help, not just about what help you need.
What about hybrid then? Is that the holy grail? Because that certainly seems to be the way a lot of people are doing it, like a Monday and Friday off if they're office workers and going in a Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday.
Yeah, it is. However, this works best if you are probably a little bit more specific about it. So, for instance, what companies are doing is the teams, rather than companies, say things like, we're going to have anchor days. So let's say every Tuesday and Thursday, the team are in the office. So then everybody knows everyone else is going to go in. Because sometimes some people like to go in on a Friday. So there's no point one person going in on Friday and Monday and Tuesday and the other person going in on Wednesday and Thursday, and you don't actually, overlap. So I think anchor days are very important for people. But it's more than just the hybrid, because as I said, it's actually got to be that the work has to be somewhat different when you're in the office than when you're at home. But there is no issue with hybrid. Hybrid is fantastic because there is absolutely times when it is a complete waste of time to travel an hour each way for a meeting. And secondly, sometimes these meetings now don't happen because you realise, if we had to go that way, we don't need to have this at all. We can just have a quick phone call. So hybrid is definitely not going to go away. I just worry a little bit. And probably most of the tech companies are saying, we never need to meet again. We can do everything online. Evolution has shown us things like rapport. You can't build rapport over a screen. It's like literally a biological thing around, mirror neurons and oxytocin and all these things that happen when we're together. But you can't have that over a screen. So it doesn't mean those meetings aren't important over screens to save time, but you also have to realize the messiness of conversation sometimes needs us to be in the room together.
What about just having an honesty around work and life? I feel like it was there during the pandemic that you could say obviously nobody had childcare, that you were having a tough day, that you might, skip this meeting now, but you'd be online later, or that you were feeling stressed, so you were going to head out for a walk. And now it's just like business as usual, carry on, and people still have things going on in their life. Are we not moving into an area where we can be a bit more open and honest? Just because you're going to have a bad morning doesn't mean you're going to be a bad worker.
Yeah, and this comes from the top. I mean, and you're dead right. During the pandemic, I remember chatting to a CEO, and he said he was having terrible conversations with his team, and he just one day said, guys, I'm having a shocker today. I'm feeling guilty. I'm not doing great things at home. I don't think I'm doing very well at work. And suddenly everybody else opened up because the leader, so this comes from the leader. So if they are honest and vulnerable and sometimes a little bit humble, it's easier for other people. But I have to say the opposite side, because if there's employers listening, sometimes they'll say that people are saying, I can't come into work today because nobody's minding my dog. And you're kind of going, no, you cannot use that as an excuse anymore, because you know what, that is kind of a day-to-day issue that you need to deal with. So I'm not saying that people don't get sick and things happen, but people are often now using these as like every week responses for, I can't come in because of this and I can't come in because of that. And employers are going, hang on, 5 years ago you came in 5 days a week and we didn't have any of this. So there has to be some kind of understanding. There's a little bit of nuance around this, and both people have to give a little back. And everybody's kind of going, I've heard employees going, I never need to come into the office anymore and this really suits me, but actually that doesn't work for everybody else. So we've got to kind of meet somewhere in the middle there.
Peter Cosgrove, Managing Director of FutureWise, an expert on future trends. Thank you for working on Bank Holiday Monday for us. Very interesting talking to you.